Good morning, everybody. I am here with Dr. Mark Hagen from Fearfully and Wonderfully Made out in Orland Park, Illinois. So Dr. Hagen was introduced to me a few years ago now, and I'd seen a lot of my friends actually really influenced by coming to his practice, and so I was incredibly blessed by that. I've seen lots of friends go on his supplemental courses and really just come out feeling a lot better. And so I visited myself, and actually he's been Gabby's doctor now for the past 6 months, I think. And she's been doing awesome. And so when I thought about this topic and I thought about somebody who would be really gifted in sharing it with us, I wanted to talk to Dr. Hagen, because obviously this is his area of expertise and clearly not mine. So I am delighted to invite to you Dr. Hagen. You are going to learn so much in the next half hour, and I am thrilled to introduce him to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. So I haven't done a live chat like this over the internet, so it's sort of breaking new ground for me here. So bear with me if it seems I'm stumbling around a little bit. I'm just going to be finding my way as we go along. The topic I was asked to speak on was how traditional medicine has failed us. And maybe I always like to spin things around upside down a little bit. In a way, it's helped us, obviously, as well. It's not as if it's a total failure. I don't want to present an overly bleak picture. But I guess, I've been in practice for a little over 30 years now, and I guess what I've learned as I've traveled this road that I've been on is that there certainly are limitations and overextensions of medicine's usefulness, and then that does create problems. Maybe as a way of introducing how I came to some of the information that I've become aware of, maybe I'll just give a little bit background about myself. I graduated from University of Illinois Medical School in 1986, and that was a combination being at Urbana in Peoria. And I got into medicine sort of as my second or third idea of what I wanted to do with my life. I was one of those people that didn't have a clear path established in my brain, and I stumbled around a little bit. I feel that God eventually was the one that gave me my direction. But probably one of the life-altering events that occurred to me when I was in medical school was I came across a book called Confessions of a Medical Heretic by Robert Mendelson. Interestingly enough, the book was recommended to me by my medical school. I'm not sure they had complete awareness of what they were doing there, but in between my second and third year, that's sort of a transitional point where you're moving from strictly academic work to now you're going to be out in the hospital and seeing patients and seeing how all this works out. And I will admit the first 2 years were extremely overwhelming. I felt like, they give you a stack of books this high and say, all you have to do is memorize everything in these books, you're good. And that's what it felt like. I was cramming my brain full with more information than I had ever thought could possibly be contained in there. And it was an arduous process. And I enjoy reading, I enjoy learning, but that almost made it less enjoyable. But so it was interesting. We had a month where they sort of didn't know what to do with us. And I think it was somebody in administration, I don't think it was a medical doctor, said, oh, let's have them do reports, and they can just find an interesting topic they want to present to a small group, and we'll just sort of broaden their horizons that way. So they gave us a list of about 15, 20 books to look at, and I was just attracted to this book's title. As a matter of fact, I have a copy of the book with me. I'll just flash it here on the screen. Confessions of a Medical Heretic, Robert S. Mendelson. I got to meet Dr. Mendelson once It was an amazing experience. He was a Chicago-based pediatrician that had impeccable credentials. He has a lot more credentials than I have or ever will. And he was plugged into government programs. He was in advisory committees. He was in the medical schools. And he did something very unusual. He decided, after being immersed in medicine for many years, that there were a lot of problems. And if you want a clearer view than what I'll give you in the short time we'll have together here of what some of those problems are, I recommend that book to you, Confessions of a Medical Heretic. It's what they call an oldie but goodie. It was written back in the 70s, 80s, and still has a lot of wisdom for us today, because I think Dr. Mendelson was a very far-reaching visionary and very astute at analyzing problems. But anyway, I gave a report on that book, and that book basically gave me a new idea. And the new idea was medicine isn't always totally scientific. I had sort of come into medicine with the idea that, okay, this is just pure science. All I have to do is memorize it. Science is truth. Therefore, I'll be good. I'll know everything I need to know, and we'll be out there and solve everybody's problems, heal the world. And of course, the more you're out, applying traditional medicine, you meet with some frustration because you're not always seeing people get as well as you wanted to see them get. You're not seeing the health and restoration of health that you would wish for people to have. So Dr. Mendelson's book does a good job of explaining that there's more to medicine than just science. There's other aspects. There's economic interests. There's politics. There's training programs. An example he would give is, your doctor may recommend a procedure to you, but you may find out later that they need to get 100 of those procedures done so their students can get trained. So maybe you're, partially being used as in a training situation. And the interesting thing is, his point is that these kind of decisions and issues coming up with medicine aren't necessarily malicious. It's not like your doctor has a plan in his brain, I'm going to, take advantage of this situation. But it just becomes the actual scary part of it. It sort of becomes just a part of your ideas, and you just sort of think it's your own ideas, and it's just the way things should be, and you don't really see that there's other motivations in the background. I'll give you an example. When I walked into medical school, first day, I got a Littmann stethoscope and about 6 or 7 or 8 nice sort of like picture books you could have on your coffee table, but they were all about medical topics and things, all provided by the drug companies that were funding my education in my medical school. You from the day you walked in, you started getting freebies. You started getting things provided by the drug companies and such that fund our medical system. Thank you. That's the word. Claire will be my word point person here. When I look blank, Claire, just give me that word. So the reading of that book really opened up my mind to realize that medicine is not pure science. Far from it. There is a scientific aspect to it. There is science mixed in there, but separating out what's truly scientific and what isn't is a challenge, to say the least. What I was going to say is you should really look at our medical system for what it is. It's a pharmaceutically based system. If you have a problem that can be helped or solved by a pharmaceutical medication, this is the system for you. You will be in the right place at the right time. But if you have a problem that can be solved by other means, you might not be in the right place. But as a doctor, what I like to use is maybe the illustration of a toolbox. You're given a toolbox with a set of tools, and those are the tools you have. So, they always talk about don't try to solve a problem, with a sledgehammer if you can use something a little bit more delicate. You can't split a diamond with a sledgehammer. But sometimes in medicine, that's what we end up doing, because you have some high-powered tools in there, and they may not be the best resource for the problem you're facing. So that's what this stuff is behind me there. It's like another toolbox, right? Maybe you can avail yourself of other tools that will give you better results, fewer side effects, and solve your problems, more satisfactorily. But for me, it was an arduous path to sort of begin to separate where's the truth and where's not the truth. But I'll tell you another interesting piece of that puzzle was I was involved in home birth for 25 years. And the way I got involved in home birth was my wife and I were expecting we'd had 2 babies in the hospital when I was in medical school. My wife, we moved up into this area in Chicago area, and was in a training program there, a residency program. And my wife said, "That's it. I'm not doing this in the hospital anymore." And we'd had some friends who would use a home birth service. Interestingly enough, talk about how everything is interconnected. The foreword to Dr. Mendelson's book, Confessions of a Medical Heretic, gives gives commendation to one of his top students that he liked, and that was Dr. Mayer Eisenstein. So Dr. Eisenstein is mentioned in the book. I had no idea there was a connection. We ended up going to Dr. Eisenstein's practice for a home birth. And I will tell you, after coming across that material in Dr. Mendelson's book, and as I'm ending the end of my training as a physician, I've spent quite a number of years now on this path, and I'm getting to the end of the path, and I'm beginning to think, I'm just not in the right place. I'm not, what if you interview anybody that goes into medicine, 99 times out of 100, everybody will say, I want to help people. I want to see people getting better. I want to see people getting healthier. And I was disappointed with the results that I was seeing. There were certain things that seemed to work okay, but there were other things that didn't seem to work much at all. I kept seeing the same people back and back and back and back, and no improvements, and we're just sort of slugging along, and it was discouraging. And I thought at the end of this path, I thought, I just chose the wrong path. I'm in totally the wrong place. What am I doing here? How can I get out of this? And my wife had a baby at home, and all of a sudden, that made sense. When I saw, the way everything was handled, we had I tell you, the most interesting thing from a father's perspective was that I felt from the very first moment of birth that the baby was ours. And it's strange, I didn't even realize that feeling was missing until I compared it to what had happened in the hospital. But I realized, hey, in the hospital, we always just sort of like stood back, hand the baby over, or didn't even touch the baby for a while. It's like that baby belonged to the hospital for a bit of time. And it was strange at the home birth. It was like, here's your baby. It's like, wow, this is our baby. And we didn't have to, I realized before I'd always ask permission to hold the baby, ask permission to touch the baby, ask for, I was sort of a, play by the rules type of guy, just like whatever you tell me to do, that's what I'm going to do. So coming into this arena, you have to realize it's been sort of antithetical to my tendencies. I'm a follow the rules type of guy. Let's just play by the rule book. And Dr. Mendelson is the one that started me on the road of heresy, as he calls it. The reason he calls it heresy is just because you're asking questions. But you know what? That turns out to be the job of science, is to ask questions. And so I felt that many of the things that I was reading in his material and others as I went along were more legitimate scientists. They were asking questions. I will tell you, one of the biggest problems I see that we face today in the 21st century is that we have developed a very distorted and inaccurate viewpoint of what science is, what it does, and what it should be. Science is always a questioning process in search of the truth and never quite getting there. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And that's the way it should be. But we have come into an age where I have seen that vision sort of turned upside down. And now we are in an arena where I regularly come across viewpoints that's it, science settled it, science has spoken, we will no longer question. That's not science. That's something else that has taken on the appearance or the veneer of science. We can never stop asking questions. That's how science has progressed. I'm going to recommend, I'm a book person. I will confess that. My wife knows that. I have way too many books. But my quest has always been, what's the reality? What's the real story? And even when I'm telling you now, this is where I most enjoy analyzing things. I'm what they call a big picture person. I like to know what is the big picture, what is really the reality, what's really going on behind the scenes. Another book that I came across actually in college, just before I went to medical school, was a book by Thomas Kuhn called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And Thomas Kuhn is a very interesting fellow. He's a historian, a scientific historian. So he has background in both arenas. And his observation was that science isn't just this accumulation of knowledge. And that's sort of what it always felt like to me. It's like, just here's a book, memorize everything in the book. Now you know more now, and we just keep adding to your knowledge base, and finally you're a pretty smart guy. But really what he said was science occurs in jumps and stages, really, where you have a model that sort of explains how things are going. He uses the example of the Earth-centered model, and then the Copernican revolution comes along and we change to a sun-centered model. There's more interesting thoughts with that to think about, but I won't go there. But anyway, what happens is scientists are always using a model. A model has assumptions. That means we don't always have facts to hang all of our understandings and beliefs on. We start with a model that is our idea of the way things are. In medicine, an idea of a model would be the germ theory of disease. And once you have that model, then you sort of see how well your experiments and reality are fitting in with that model. And what happens is you get a scientific revolution when you have enough data that doesn't fit into the model, and people hang on to the model, especially scientists, hang on to the model with all their might. But eventually, if enough data accumulates that shows, hey, this model isn't really isn't really giving us the right picture of reality, they find another model, and then that model, everybody jumps onto that model, and now that's the new way of understanding what's going on and what's going on with reality. Anyway, I really appreciated Thomas Kuhn's ideas about how science goes forward. So that was another eye-opening experience with me. With the home birth, what intrigued me was, as I did, because home birth had never been mentioned in medical school. That was just not a topic we came across. And so I did more scientific research on home birth. I was amazed to find that there were countries, Denmark, England, that had large home birth practices and populations. When they did studies, they showed that, hey, they were getting better outcomes, less infection, less surgery, less intervention. It was amazing. I thought, okay, this is, not only was it a fun thing, a great thing, a beautiful thing, but it was actually safer. It was actually the way to have a baby. And then you look at history and you realize for many, many years, doctors wouldn't deliver babies. Back in the 16, 17, 1800s, they would say, no, that's woman's work. That's like, let the midwives do that kind of stuff. That's not even medicine, But eventually, they took it on. They took it under their auspices, and it became a medical procedure, a medical practice.
Okay, so can I ask you, Dr. Zoomhagen,
Sure.
where Fearfully and Wonderfully Made came from, what your vision was for it, and kind of how you, what you do here exactly, and how you integrate all this with a lifestyle of...
You're trying to get to the present now. I see what you're doing. Okay. So what happened was the home birth practice was ending. A lot because it's very hard to integrate home birth into the present insurance system, and so economically it just was hard to keep running, and it was extremely time consuming. I frequently got called away from my family doing births, but I was having very bad migraine headaches. This is back when I'm in my 40s, and I didn't know exactly where to look, but I knew that I wasn't getting any real good answers in the pharmaceutical arena. So I went to a chiropractor that was doing a nutritional technique that sort of checked out the body, see where your nutrition is deficient, and put that nutrition in and see what happens. It looked really strange, and I thought, wow, this is like, but I'm so desperate, I'm going to do this. So I jumped in, and it worked. He also had me change my diet. He had me get off sugar. Turns out to be like the bane of our existence. If you're going to do one thing nutritionally that will improve your health across the board, get off sugar. Cakes, cookies, candies, ice cream, soda, throw that stuff out, because that turns out to be what really is the biggest strain and stress on your body. The body is amazing. That is definitely one thing I've learned as I worked through nutrition. That's why the name Fearfully and Wonderfully Made stayed on the door there, is because the more I was involved in seeing how nutrition helps the body and how capable the body is of self-healing, I realized, it's because we're fearfully and wonderfully made. The Lord made us that way. So as much as I was oriented towards trying to stay natural in the home birth arena that I was involved in, I still didn't have very much understanding of nutrition. I always like to make this point. There are two subjects that are, for all practicality, never discussed in medical school, and they really should be. One is nutrition. Get points if you can think of the other one. The other one is medical history, because you come out of medical school thinking, I'm cutting edge, I've got all the knowledge, and you're even sort of, in some sense, sort of taught to disparage those guys that have been out there for 30, 40 years because there's no way they've been able to keep up, and they're sort of like, they don't really know what they're doing anymore. I know what I'm doing. You know, it's a very type of, you know, arrogant attitude that you could come away with. Not everybody does, but it's definitely available. But what I was saying is that I began to look at nutrition and began to study it, and that's a challenging topic as well, because there's so many different viewpoints and so many different theories, and we have our government telling us, oh, it's all about fat, go low fat, go anything but saturated fat. Another great historical book that I tell people about is called The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. There have been many people, Gary Taubes and different people that have written very good books about this history. But if you ever want to understand sort of this intersection of medicine and science and politics and pharmaceuticals and money and how it all intersects, look at what has taken place within our lifetimes in terms of the understanding of nutrition and where the root of the problems are. Because we go from Ansel Keys and his research back in the 40s and 50s, where he came up with this fat heart hypothesis where you eat fat, it goes to your heart, that's what kills you. And that's what our whole governmental recommendations, the food industry has run with that. We're all about low fat. You can even find low-fat lifesavers now. I know because that's what it says in the label. Amazing, isn't it? Actually, of course, the lifesavers never did have fat, but that's how great the marketing is. But actually, what I appreciated is once you start getting on what I call a truth stream, it's like these are the voices, and they're starting to agree with each other, and they're all sort of saying the same thing. Then you sort of get a direction of where to go in. And another good truth stream is, anyway, you were going to ask me a question. I better answer your question.
No, go ahead.
Are we, Weston A Price. Weston A Price, they have a website, very good for nutritional advice. But it turns out sugar kills us. That's the good and the bad news. Sugar kills us very slowly. but that's sort of a good and a bad thing, because it would be almost better if it was more obvious what was happening. There are doctors now, and one of the people I always recommend people to is Jason Fung, who've done work where he's a nephrologist, a kidney specialist out of Canada, and he takes type 2 diabetics now, not type 1, type 2. And he used to get so frustrated because he'd keep these people on medicine, they'd keep getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and eventually die. And he found that if you work on their diet and take them off sugar, and he incorporates fasting as well, you can actually get them off all their medications. So it's amazing. The body has immense healing capacities. Let me talk about oils, because I think that's one of the reasons I'm here. So there is a person that's coming after me, and so I encourage you to stay tuned into the feed. Would this be tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
What time?
12 o'clock.
Okay, 12 o'clock tomorrow. Be here or be nowhere. The way oils come into place that I found helpful is the body responds to oils, no question about it. And the person that's going to be presenting will give you more of the science behind that, how it works, why it works, and such. I will just tell you it works. And where I see people using these the most is for like acute situations. They've got a headache, they've got nausea, they've got something going on, and it's not pleasant, and it's not the way God made their body to be working, and they need some relief. And when I work with people nutritionally, we're looking usually at sort of a longer trajectory where, okay, we're going to start eating healthier, we're going to maybe use some supplements that meet some particular needs your body's looking for, and over a course of time, we see progress. But sometimes we need some answers right away. And I find that that's probably where I've seen the oils work the best. People will use them, and then you can avoid the antihistamine, the Tylenol, the Motrin, whatever. You can avoid all those over-the-counter things. And then sometimes, it's amazing. Everybody's body responds a little bit differently. And I guess that's sort of sometimes what makes nutrition challenging, because there's some individuality to this. But in general, the principle is always the same. Body has a lot of capability to heal. We want to activate that potential as much as possible. And sometimes it's being held down by our diet, by other things. I have to, how much time do I have left?
Like 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. That went fast. Now I know when my staff says I talk too much to patients, it goes too fast. I would like to just mention, since the topic was how modern medicine has failed us, I would just like to leave you with 2 minutes that one of the areas that I feel needs further investigation, because we don't have the answers that we've needed in this area, is vaccines. Obviously, where medicine does its best work is something's really broken and needs to be fixed. And if you need to fix it fast, you're in a car accident or something, you're bleeding, let's get to the emergency room, and medicine is going to do a great job of patching you up. Second best answer is sometimes you have something chronic, high blood pressure, diabetes, multiple sclerosis. That's where medicine is less helpful in many times, because you end up on a pharmaceutical, you can't get off of it, and that's it for the rest of your life. Side effects of the pharmaceutical, sometimes you get in multiple pharmaceuticals, and you go down this path where by the time you hit 70 or 80, you're on 10, 15 different medications. It's probably not ideal. If we can find a way to activate your own body's healing and start subtracting out some of those medicines like Dr. Fung does, we're better off. We're always better off as much as possible if we can use the body's own resources. The third area that medicine comes in is preventative. This body's working great, everything is going great, but we're going to make it better, injecting, now we have about, 70 different things over the course of a young person's life. And in the first hour of life, a vaccine for a sexually transmitted disease. That's where we cross a line. I would just tell you, from being in my home birth practice, we never had a case of autism surface in thousands of people we took care of that were delivered at home and very minimally or not vaccinated. Therefore, I have seen the controlled study that has never been done, that needs to be done, that compares vaccinated with non-vaccinated children. Science hasn't failed us, because if we did the science, it would show us exactly what's going on. But medicine has failed us, because medicine isn't always scientific. And I guess that's my maybe main point that I'll make. Medicine succeeds the more scientific it is, and where we would benefit from a change in our current medical system is if it would not be solely focused in pharmaceuticals. If we could have a more open system. Europe has this too, where they do homeopathy, and everybody works together. That's possible. It's not like the chiropractor's taking away my business. He's not. The homeopathic's taking away my business. They're not. We can all work together, and we can all make people healthier, help people stay on a healthier path. And you can mix this all together. To the extent that the oils and the chiropractor and the homeopathic are working, hey, you won't need as many medications. And I guess that does present a problem for the pharmaceutical industry. But the number one, determiner of all of this should be you, should be your health, not the system as it's running. And that's where we get into problems, when the decisions are made in favor of the system rather than the favor of the patient. So with that, I will end, but I really appreciate Claire giving me a platform to speak to who's ever out there listening, and I commend you to, keep tuned in to her information. I've been finding it valuable as I'm still trying to figure everything out as I go along. Thank you for your time.